Long ago, there was a very young boy who became king of a nation. He was driven to remove all relics of the ancient paganism that had become so entrenched at the realm. From a young age, he had been tutored in the scriptures by a devout religious leader, and felt his position was God-given for him to return his realm to the truth of the Bible. His father before him had defied the established religion, but it still continued with the artifacts and icons of paganism. Even though he was still very young, the monarch felt compelled by God to clean up his kingdom and take it to the true religion as he saw it. Pagan images and icons were destroyed, and Reformed doctrines were made official. The young king devoutly studied the Bible, reading 12 chapters daily, and sought to make his kingdom one that turned wholeheartedly to God. Unfortunately, due to an untimely death, the young king was not able to implement all the changes he envisioned or establish them long enough to bring about permanent change. The name of this young king was Edward VI, and he was the only legitimate son of his father, Henry VIII. It was during Edward's reign that Protestantism was established for the first time in England, with reforms that included the abolition of clerical celibacy, the Mass, and the imposition of compulsory services in English. Nothing had really changed under his father, other than the break from Rome. When he died, his sister became monarch because of the carnage of Christian Protestants that ensued. She became known as Bloody Mary. Mary was the daughter of Catherine of Aragon and Henry VIII. William Tyndale, making use of the newly allowed access to Greek and relying on works of other Protestant reformers, and the printing press translated the Bible that was used in the translation of the Matthew's Bible that came available to many during the reign of Henry. A copy of Tyndale's The Obedience of a Christian Man said the king of a country should be the head of the country's church rather than the Pope. This fell into the hands of Henry VIII, providing the king with the rationale to create the Church of England and break from the Catholic Church in 1534, so he could divorce Catherine of Aragon. This divorce had been denied by the Pope. William Tyndale was not a favorite of King Henry after he wrote Practice of Prelates, opposing the king's annulment of his own marriage. Catherine was a child of Isabel and Ferdinand of Spain, who were known for ordering conversion to the Roman Catholic Church or face exile of their Muslim and Jewish subjects, and for supporting and financing Christopher Columbus's 1492 voyage that led to the opening of the New World. They led to the establishment of Spain as the first global power which dominated Europe and much of the world for more than a century. Mary was raised by Catherine to be a devout Catholic and despised the religion her father had adopted in order to divorce her mother. She became even more devout during her brother's Reformation efforts, and it caused a major rift between them. At one point, Henry VIII had even had Mary and Elizabeth proclaimed as illegitimate. Shortly before his death, he put them back in the succession to the throne should anything happen to their brother. Although Edward only reigned for only 6 years and died at the age of 15, his reign made lasting contribution to the English Reformation and the structure of the Church of England. Edward's reign saw radical progress in the Reformation. In those 6 years, the Church transferred from an essentially Catholic form and structure to one that was usually identified as Protestant. Edward himself fully approved these changes, and though they were the work of reformers such as Thomas Cranmer, Hugh Latimer, and Nicholas Ridley, they were backed by Edward's evangelical council. The fact that the king's backing in religion was a catalyst in the acceleration of the Reformation during his reign. He died July 6, 1553. Edward tried to change who would succeed him because he knew Mary would try to undo the progress he had made, but this ultimately failed. Queen Mary's attempts to undo the reforming work of her brother's reign faced major obstacles. Despite her belief in the papal supremacy, she ruled constitutionally as the supreme head of the English Church, a contradiction she hated. She found herself entirely unable to restore the vast number of ecclesiastical properties handed over or sold to private landowners by her father and brother. Although she burned 280 leading Protestant churchmen at the stake, many reformers either went into exile or remained observantly active in England during her reign, producing a torrent of reforming propaganda that she is unable to stem. Had Mary lived longer, her Catholic reconstruction might have succeeded, but she died without an heir after reigning 5 years. Mary agonized over the possibility, but did not kill Elizabeth because she was her half-sister and rightful heir to the throne. Killing an heir to the throne was a serious matter then, and Mary, a good Catholic, may have feared that would prevent her from entering heaven. But killing heretics, of course, was a good thing. In addition, though Elizabeth was raised Protestant, she attended Catholic masses and worked to avoid giving Mary a reason to kill her. She had at least twice been suspected of plotting against Mary, so was careful to circumspect in that regard. Basically, she gave Mary no smoking gun in order to be killed, and obeyed Mary as the rightful king or queen. Mary's advisors argued on both sides of the issue, but the let Elizabeth live side won out. Edward had seen himself as another Josiah. Unfortunately, his sister Elizabeth tried to continue his legacy, and when she took the throne. The life of Josiah can be found in 2 Kings 22, if you'd like to turn there. 2 Kings 22, and we'll start in verses 1 and 2. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned 31 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jedidah, and the daughter of Adiah of Bozkath. I'm sure that's not how you pronounce their names, but it's close enough for me. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the ways of his father David. He did not turn against the right hand or the left. As the story progresses, one of the priests found the book of the law that God had said for the monarchy to read and write down, but this had been lost over time. Josiah was distraught when he learned what he and the people were supposed to be doing. He requested that those with him inquire of God what we should do. Hilkiah the priest and his companions went to Huldah the prophetess to inquire of God. If you go on down to verse 16 of Kings 22, to see what her response from God was for the king. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will bring calamity on this place and on its inhabitants. All the words of the book which the king of Judah has read. Because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath shall be aroused against this place, and shall not be quenched. But as for the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of the Lord, in this manner you shall speak to him. Thus says the Lord God of Israel, concerning the words which you have heard. Because your heart was tender, and you humbled yourself before the Lord, when you heard what I spoke against this place and against the inhabitants, that they would become a desolation and a curse, and you tore your clothes and wept before me, I have also heard you, says the Lord. Verse 20, surely therefore I will gather you to your fathers, and you shall be gathered to your grave in peace, and your eyes shall not see all the calamity which I will bring on this place. So they brought back the words to the king. If we turn to 2 Kings 23, verses 3 through 8, to see what Josiah did to clean up the land. In verse 3, then the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord, to follow the Lord and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all his heart, all his soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people took a stand for the covenant. And the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, the priests of the second order, and the doorkeepers to keep out of the temple of the Lord all the articles that were made for Baal and Asherah, and for all the host of heaven. And he burnt them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kindra, and carried their ashes to Bethel. Then he removed the idolatrous priests whom the king of Judah had ordained to burn incense on the high places in the cities of Judah and the places all around Jerusalem, and those who burnt incense to Baal, to the sun, to the moon, to the constellations, and to all the hosts of heaven. And he brought out the wooden images from the house of the Lord to the brook Kidron, outside Jerusalem, burn it at the brook Kidron, and the ground to the ashes, and threw the ashes on the graves of the common people. In verse 7, then he tore down the ritual booths of the perverted persons that were in the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the wooden image. And he brought all the priests from the cities of Judah, and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense, from Geba to Beersheba, and he broke down the high places at the gates which were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were at the left of the city gate. And of course you can read the rest of the chapter. Just see the rest of the changes that Josiah initiated in the land. In 1558, with the death of Bloody Mary, the English Reformation resumed its course, and most of the reforms instituted during Edward's reign were reinstated in the Elizabethan religious settlement. Queen Elizabeth replaced Mary's counselors and bishops with ex-Edwardians such as William Cecil and Richard Cox, Edward's old tutor, who preached an anti-Catholic sermon at the opening of Parliament in 1559. Both Edward and Josiah tore down religious artifacts that were pagan in origin. Both sought to have their realm returned to true religion. Both died young without establishing lasting change in their kingdom. Josiah's son, much as Mary had done, returned to paganism. Josiah had sought to rid the kingdom of, and it ultimately led to Judah's downfall and captivity. Edward's legacy, that of his sister Elizabeth, led to a breaking free from Catholic religion and to an end of the loosening of religious persecution and denomination from Rome. The Bible became readily available due to the efforts of King James, the great-great-grandson of Henry VII, who succeeded Elizabeth when she died childless and the line of Henry VIII came to an end. While Edward, the boy king, did not understand the truth, his zeal to return his nation to true religion ultimately helped open the door to the changes that have allowed the truth to be preached around the world in these modern times.